become the habit of many during these times to engage in identitarianism. Many people of different ethnicities and religions now live within the same cities, and this brings about insecurities. The internationalists who encourage this melting pot system ensures that this will bring about a world without war, where all races mix together, and wherever you go, everywhere will be the same, and everyone will be the same, so why fight each other? We see this ideology playing out all over the world in the form of soulless architecture. From America to London to Dubai to Japan, everywhere now looks the same. These people are still working towards such a goal and see the current hiccups as necessary, justified in the end. Once the utopia is said and done, we'll all look back and laugh. Meanwhile, it is up to us to come to terms with the chaos that has been imposed upon us and try to understand each other's point of view. Both Christian nationalism and Hindutva, or Hindu nationalism, can be defined by the politicization of religion. The sacred aspects of each religion take backstage to the more pressing matter of each one's threatened cultural identity. True individual spiritual development is replaced by a collective zeal. From the Christians' perspective, Christ gave their ancestors unity among their people and led them to great material success that they shared the world through European empires, most impressive of all being the British. They were then betrayed by their own leaders, the empires dismantled, and the world was left to fall apart, while Europe and the Anglo colonies, excluding the ones in Africa, continued to thrive in material abundance as pious Christian nations, until around the 1980s to 1990s, when the leaders began bringing in outsiders, despite them continuously voting against such policies. These people came in with their non-Christian ways and foreign customs and started spoiling the good thing they are going on. Then, to rub salt in the wounds, the outsiders then start working their way into positions of power to provide better agency within their communities. This is the land we have lived in for 1,000 years, they would say. Our ancestors built these buildings and roads that are taken advantage of by these people from outside with no connection to the land, and people whose bloodline goes way back are now given less opportunities. Positive discrimination, they call it. And so, the once unified and civil Europe is now broken up into different groups who don't like each other, and many of them coming in are criminals who hate the native people and do unspeakable things to their women and children. That is why we must go back to Christ. Christ is king, and actually crusades are based. Meanwhile, the Hindutva see differently. They would make arguments that while Europe was attempting to create a calendar system without yet understanding the concept of zero, they already had an advanced understanding of mathematics and arguably a superior calendar system which works in sync with the sun and moon cycles. And they had universities long before Oxford and Cambridge, which of course were sadly destroyed during the Mughal invasions. There are almost no temples left in the north of India and what we now call Pakistan. The physical destruction during those times was terrible. Not to mention how the people were treated, women and children. Something any European can sympathise with, I'm sure. And then slowly came in the British. Merchants at first, then later the country was slowly colonised until the British Raj was formally declared. Now, I would like to point out that it was at this point that the mistreatment by the Mohammedans was put a stop to by the British. But what they substituted was a far more passive-aggressive form of religious subversion that I personally consider to be quite dishonourable. Once the most elegant language of Sanskrit was learned, a language said to be even more elegant than Greek, European Indologists realised the superiority of Sanatana Dharma, commonly known as Hinduism. They realised that it had a far more rich philosophy and consistent narrative throughout. Bearing in mind this is not merely one book like the Bible or Quran, but rather an entire library of literature. And so, in order to save face as the chosen overmen under the superiority of the one true religion, they took over the education system. The children, of course, did not speak Sanskrit and were taught to read and write in English, and all they learned of the Vedic literature was through the deliberately mistranslated books, which displayed an inconsistent, contradictory body of work. This continues to mislead both Europeans and Indians as to the true Vedic teachings to this day. Even until the modern day, one learns of the legacy of Christianity in India through anecdotes that the average Westerner is entirely ignorant to. Indians, typically in the South, who convert to Christianity, as I understand it, and with all due respect to our South Indian friends, are referred to as rice bag Christians, as they are understood to convert on the basis that people who are Christian are materially wealthy, and so the joke is that the church gives them a free bag of rice when they get baptized, which may very well have some truth to it. Converts of this type are understood to be fiercely zealous. The first anecdote involves Christian teachers taking children on a school trip. The bus is deliberately sabotaged. As the performance goes on, the children are invited to pray to Krishna and then to Ganesha. Oh no, that didn't work. Then let's try Jesus, at which point the spark plug is plugged back in and the engine starts. The second is of Christians waiting until Hindu parents go to work, leaving their children behind at home. They then invite themselves in order to baptize the children, against the parents' wishes, creating much dysfunction in the household thereafter. One more involves two statues being made. One is the sacred form of the Virgin Mary, and the second is the idol of a Hindu deity. One is hollow and one is filled with lead, and so the Virgin Mary floats, so everyone is convinced to convert to Christianity. Allow me to point out also that in contrast to Western politics, in which we are familiar with the Islamo-Communist alliance, in India, as I understand, it is far more common for Christians to align with the far left to form an alliance of convenience against the natural state religion of Hinduism in order to subvert it. And so, politically speaking, Christians are seen as Muslims are seen in the UK. If you will indulge me, I would like to now share some opinions along with a positive vision for the future, particularly from the perspective of my beloved United Kingdom. Firstly, Christian nationalists often speak as though their religion is special because, from their perspective, in their country, no, say, Hindus or Buddhists are being persecuted, and only their religion is being attacked. So this means that they follow the one true religion, and this is the religion that the devil is trying to destroy in their mind. And yes, there are plenty of countries around the world that are witnessing the persecution of Christians, indeed even in India, and that is terrible. But I have at least demonstrated here in that case what this is a reaction to. I can't speak to the context of all countries, but I would like to point out that there are many other faiths being tyrannized, some of the most famous being the Tibetan Buddhists and the Uyghur under the China government. There are also the Zoroastrians following the Iranian Islamic occupation. It's largely circumstantial who gets mistreated in what country, and indeed, is it not a demonic force that works through many Christians that seeks to persecute Hindus? It's also important to understand that it's not impossible to have a good civilization without Christianity. Plenty of great civilizations have existed throughout the world that had different faiths. The civilization that bloomed under the Catholic Church was awe-inspiring, but so was the preceding Rome under paganism, quote unquote. Additionally, with all due respect, one gets the impression that many young Christians are choosing their faith for political reasons. I am familiar that there are some people who don't really believe in God but go to church out of a sense of cultural obligation. I find such a thing incomprehensible and quite unhealthy. Religion is not a law. It should be treated on an individual basis according to one's resonance to it, and not forced. Similarly, no one should feel obligated to follow the religion of their parents. If one sincerely tries to understand the religion of his parents and still doesn't feel a resonance to it, he should continue in his spiritual seeking in other paths, in my opinion. I appreciate that there are true believers, and I respect that. I do not wish to take anything away from people sincere in their faith. But the truth is, Britain is never going to reset itself to the point it was at during the Victorian era. We are not a Christian country. Even if you deported every foreign person, less than half of white people identify as Christian, and a lot of them seem to tick the box for cultural reasons because their parents baptized them, and not because they believe in the Bible. Church attendance is still very low, around 6%, made up largely by the Jamaican community. Christians have no justification in complaining about the conversion of churches into mosques, for at least they continue to use them as places of worship, while natives convert them into flats. I'm not saying this because I wish to further subvert the tradition our nation was founded on. I am simply stating a matter of fact. As a Vaishnava, the Christian values of my grandparents largely align with mine, so I would have no problem with us being a Christian nation so long as it was not a radical theocracy. Of course, there should be support for sincere Christians in finding each other and forming tight communities because much of the friction comes from them projecting their own insecurities as a scattered community onto others. And of course, it is their birthright as English, Scot, Welsh, and Irish men and women to live under the protection of the state without fear of harassment or persecution, so long as they simply wish to live in peace. In any case, though religions may come and go, the people of a nation remain a constant. And rest assured, like it or not, we exist and we shall remain. With all that said, much of what the English Christian nationalists argue is not incorrect as regards the mistreatment of our people. Two wrongs do not make a right. Many of these people are descendants of farmhands and shopkeepers, and not of aristocrats or merchant bankers, and do not deserve to be punished. Why would they? To suggest that they do based on the fact that they are just the same by virtue of their race is extremely Anglophobic. I would personally like to see a strong alliance between the Anglo colonies and India. We have a strong history together for good and for bad, and I think we should be close allies. But with all that said, we haven't yet brought up the many criticisms from the West aimed at India, the most pressing one being the huge litter problem. Unlike other Westerners, who have nobly come to India's defence by deflecting attention to the many nice areas that do indeed exist, I would rather take the stance that there are many valid criticisms to be made. This is not news to Indians, as they continue to flood Europe and North America, fully conscious of the fact that our countries are more pleasant to live in. Individuals must take responsibility for their own communities and shouldn't lean on the shovel while Mr. Modi takes care of it all. If you feel a sense of nationalism towards your motherland, return to her and make her into a country you would be proud to raise your children in, so that in turn we may do likewise in your absence. Then we may admire each other's nations from afar. In the meantime, Westerners shouldn't be so childish. We should be sympathetic at the very least. And interestingly, if we take a Vedic cyclical view of history, as opposed to the Christian linear view, we would notice that during the Dark Ages of Europe, India was experiencing a golden age, starting under the Gupta Empire, demonstrating high hygiene standards and intellectual achievement. It was during this time that the Indians saw us as filthy barbarians. Also, to the Hindutva, consider the argument that, like Christianity, Sanatana Dharma is a universalist religion. Sanatana Dharma means the eternal natural way. To argue that it belongs to India would be to say that Christianity belongs to Palestine. The natural order of the cosmos is not confined such that it cannot cross the Arabian Sea. Additionally, Hindu nationalist movement has proven to be terrible for international relations. From the 1960s to 1990s, India was seen by many as exotic and cool. From the Beatles to Kula Shaker, Hindu-Indian aesthetics were celebrated along with an attraction towards Eastern mysticism as an alternative to Christianity, following the many scandals of abuse by priests and embarrassing ordeal of literal modern-day witch hunts in the form of the Satanic Panic. But Hindu nationalists got defensive of their culture, and Europeans were made to feel as though Sanatana Dharma was culturally inappropriate. One wonders whether relations would have been better had things been handled differently. And the prior mentioned non-Christians probably are made up largely of the spiritual but not religious types, for whom if there was a means by which they could formally convert to Hinduism, they likely would have, but instead they were pulled into deceptive New Age Hinduism, which has now given it a bad name. Hinduism had a foothold in the West the Islamists could only dream of. I personally feel a strong connection to the Vedic teachings, as you may tell, and hold out hope that in the future there will be significant communities of native-born Sanatanis in places like England who combine the philosophy of Vedism with the aesthetics and architecture that reflect our race, much like similar attempts during the Victorian era by the English Muslim convert Abdullah Quilliam, who founded England's first and second mosques. Not to play down the fact that there were not indeed significant English historical figures, who at the very least were strongly influenced by Sanatana Dharma, including Sir William Jones, who once said that the Hindu concept of transmigration of the soul was incomparably more rational than the Christian doctrine of endless punishment, as well as Charles Wilkins, George Harrison, T.S. Eliot, and Christopher Isherwood. Indeed, contrary to 19th century thought, it is in fact Sanatana Dharma and not Islam that is most compatible with my people, as it is the only living progenitor to all Indo-European religions, and certainly the noble ancestors of the Indian people should be commended for, against all odds, preserving that which the Druids of our race could not. Much like the Remover religion of Lithuania, who employed the services of Hindu priests to conduct fire rituals, would it not be wonderful for us to do the same in reconstructing the traditions of our ancestors, abandoning the neo-Druidry of today, which is founded on the controversial Freemasonry rooted in Babylonian Luciferianism? Of course, I do not feel that we should completely exclude people of other races. This I say not out of folly but pragmatism, thinking of those of foreign ethnic backgrounds with grandparents here, and not of those who came whimsically in recent years or months. For the latter there is no moral issue of repatriation. Those who stay must offer due respect for the heritage Anglo-Celtic peoples, who must be maintained as the dominant group, including in government. Just as India perished under British dominance, so too shall Britain perish if course is not shifted. Also to the Christians a word of caution. While the threat of radical Muslim men shouting Allahu Akbar causes one perhaps to fear for his community and well-being of women folk, it is equally concerning to see fighting-age men running around and shouting Christ is King, and trying to justify the Spanish Inquisition. No, it's not based, and it's the reason why many Europeans turn their backs on Christianity. Certainly the Christ of Sanatana Dharma, whom we call Ishaputra, would very much disapprove of such disturbing rhetoric. All this has caused me to reflect on the many reasonable, nominal Muslims and Hindus and so on that are now weighing up their options. As an example, there are people who may be of Pakistani descent but align with British values far more than with those of the Pakistan regime. The thing is, just as we have nowhere to go, neither do they. In my opinion, those with non-heritage backgrounds who wish to live in this country for reasons of legitimate asylum henceforth should be granted not citizenship but considered as subjects under the protection of the Crown, without the liberties afforded heritage citizens but still allowed to live a comfortable life and earn a living. They should not be allowed to claim benefits and should not receive free healthcare. None of these problems we find ourselves in are helped by the establishment, who only make things worse by ignoring the legitimate concerns of the lower classes, who often represent the bulk of the radicals, often acting out of a state of legitimate fear. We are no less than in a state of interregnum. The current stewards of the throne are delusional and have allowed bureaucrats to take charge who are incapable of listening to reason. They are going down with the ship and trying to take us with them. Perhaps we should start building life rafts, by which I mean form organized communities around shared values. To sum up, Indian Hindus have not been allowed to rule themselves for a very long time, until very recently. They were first colonized by the Muslims and then by the Christians. Everyone should give them a fair chance to get back on their feet. Also, foreigners wishing to make Europeans into second-class citizens are not going to change history. What you think of as revenge is in actuality cruelty and spitefulness. I hope this serves in the effort to establish dialogue between different communities, and I feel a great political fatigue in the tit-for-tat digs at each other's culture and each other's food. All the childishness of yesteryears must be put behind us. It is time to grow up. If my message has resonated with you, consider following for future videos, so that we might in time form a United Kingdom Sanatana Dharma fellowship. We must not worship the ashes of our former selves and instead rekindle the embers of our nations with the fuel of new knowledge and resources at our current disposal. All groups concerned have my sympathy, and I in no way intend to express any prejudice towards anyone. I also accept that in my ignorance I may have unintentionally shared some mistruths, and invite criticism and correction. I offer this work in service to the absolute Sriman Narayana, I thank you for your time. I wish you well.
Almighty wielder of Mjolnir, won't you come back home? Great bringer of thunder, whom the demons fear. From fell trees come new acorns, from which new oaks might be grown. Sacred growth shall be regrown, and once again be revered.